It's great to be with you guys this morning. My name is Joel Cox. I'm one of the elders here. I don't get to do this real often, just every now and then, but it's always a real joy when I do get to do it. I'm always hesitant, real hesitant when I get asked. But then I spend a few weeks kind of rooted in the same passage, which is not something I do often, to spend that much time in something. And I really feel like God teaches me something about himself and about me and about my relationship with him. And so then by the time I get to today, I get excited. I'm still a little nervous, but I'm excited to get to share with you what I feel like God has been teaching me over the last few weeks. So I'm happy to be with you guys this morning, and let's figure out what God taught Joel over the last few weeks. So we've been going through the book of Daniel the last few weeks, and this morning we'll be going through chapter 6, which is the story of Daniel and the lion's den. One of the more famous Old Testament stories for sure, but I wanted to dig deep. I didn't want to just stay surface level, so I dug way back. I went way back into my vast theological research library, past the many leather-bound books, and into some old classics that I found in my son's library. So this is how Daniel and the lion's den is often depicted in our children's books. It's very popular in our children's books. They look like puppies sometimes for some reason. Daniel cuddling with the lions. I'm a little bit afraid that my son is going to grow up not quite getting the gravity of getting thrown into a pit of lions, cornered lions, or even what it means that a kingdom has a pit of lions, just in case the need arises to, have a pit of lions. I work for an organization that does work in Africa. I've been on a few mission trips in Africa, and on a few occasions, because of those trips, I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to go to a few safari parks. And the lion is a prized sight. It's not guaranteed that you'll see a lion when you go on one of these things. But on one of my trips, we went out real early in the morning, and we drove up on a lion kill. A pride of lions had taken down a giraffe the night before, just before we had gone out, and that thing was torn up. It was gruesome. So I want to show you some pictures this morning to help us get the gravity of what it means to be thrown to a pride of lions. But my sweet wife, was like, I don't know, that's not the greatest idea maybe. So you can thank her or maybe blame her. You guys may have been, I have them. You guys will see them later. So Daniel chapter 6, Daniel and the lion's den. Let's dig in. I'm going to read for a while here, so stick with me. Try to keep up. Daniel chapter 6. Let's go ahead and put the first chunk up. But please, Darius. Okay, let's stop there. I'm going to stop. Who is Darius? Last week we were in chapter 3, which is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown into the furnace. So now we're in chapter 6. So we've jumped ahead a little bit. Johnny is going to come back next week and fill in some of what happened in between. We wanted to skip ahead because this story has some similarities with the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story, but it also stands on its own. But I do think we need to get a little context for where we are in the story since we're jumping ahead a little bit. So if you remember back at the beginning of Daniel, the kingdom of Babylon, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, attacks Judah, besieges Jerusalem, and destroys it. Destroys the temple. The Israelites, their home destroyed, their temple destroyed, are now living in exile in Babylon, a vicious, vicious kingdom. Daniel, though, makes a name for himself by interpreting the first dream of King Nebuchadnezzar, the dream about the statue, the head of gold, the body of silver and bronze, the legs of iron, representing a succession of kingdoms. Between then and chapter 6, Daniel interprets another dream for King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel continues working and serving in Babylon. He interprets a dream for King Belshazzar. When he comes along, King Belshazzar dies, and then the Medo-Persian Empire takes over Babylon, led by King Darius. So at the beginning of chapter 6, we find Daniel in the service of King Darius. But all that to say that Israel has now been in exile for 70 years. 70 years have passed since we last saw Daniel. So the Israelites have been in exile for 70 years. People have been born and lived their whole lives in exile, away from their land, away from the physical representation, the home of their God, their temple in Jerusalem, wiped off the map. And now, the kingdom that conquered them has now been conquered by another kingdom, so it's bad on top of bad. So certainly the temptation for this people in exile, this God-believing people, the temptation is to either with intent give up on their God, because where are you? Or just in getting caught up in the tide of the day. They've been living in this other culture for 70 years, this pagan culture, this multiple God-believing culture. So just through kind of just getting caught up in the tide of the day, not following their God anymore. So the question is the God of Israel worth following? Is he worth trusting? Despite your circumstances, Israel, is your God worth putting your whole weight into or not? That's the question for Israel. That's the question for us. And that's what Daniel 6 is speaking to. So Daniel 6, 1 through 3. Let's jump in. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So the new king, the new empire, they're setting up their government structure, right? So they've got these 120 satraps, and then he wants these 3 kind of executive level people. He names Daniel to one of them. So again, Daniel's old by now. 70 years have gone by since we last saw him. He's been through 4 or 5 kings. He's a seasoned vet, but still very, very highly thought of. So much so that not only is he named to one of these 3 executive positions, but the king makes it known his intention to name Daniel president or prime minister over the whole kingdom. And what is it that's distinguished Daniel? It's not his religiousness, it's his work. The NIV says by his exceptional qualities. The ESV says because an excellent spirit was in him. The Message says because Daniel was brimming with spirit and intelligence. We see this theme in previous chapters as well. In Daniel 4, the king says to Daniel, because I know the spirit of the gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you, tell me the visions of my dream. In Daniel 5, the queen tells the king, in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And later, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in Daniel. So it's his intelligence, it's his wisdom, but not just that. They're clearly connecting it to something spiritual. They just can't quite put their fingers on it, or maybe they're unwilling to at the moment, as we'll see in a little bit. So 6 verse 4. At this, the king wanting to place Daniel over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. Okay, so the other government leaders, they're not having this. They don't want more power going to someone else, especially this exile, this foreigner, this one true God believer. No, they're not having that. So they go about finding some dirt, right? Where has this guy slipped up? Surely, if this guy has been in government work for 70 years, there's some corruption going on in him. There's some negligence that has gone on. But they've come up with nothing. They could find no corruption because he was trustworthy. He was awesome at his job, and he didn't take any shortcuts. How frustrating is that? this guy through multiple kingdoms keeps shooting to the top of the ranks, and he's not even doing anything wrong to get there. They know that the only way to destroy him is to pit his God against the king. The first sign that they know exactly where this spirit is coming from. Daniel 6 through 9. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. These leaders know they've got one shot, right? They've got one shot to get this right. The king loves Daniel. The king's job is made super easy by Daniel. He's doing all the work. He wants Daniel running the show. They need to trick the king because the king would never do anything anti-Daniel on purpose. Daniel's super helpful to him. And they need the trap to be a foregone conclusion that it'll work because they won't be able to trick the king twice. They know it's got to work first time. So what's the thing they go after on the king? What's the thing they know? They know they've got to trick him. What do they go after on the king? His ego. Making him the center of the new law. They know ultimately if we go after his ego, making him number one, if we make him the center of this thing, that's his weak point. That's where we can trick him. And it works. He signs the decree. Now, what about Daniel? They know they've got one shot. What do they go after about Daniel? They go after prayer. Prayer. That has hit me for weeks now. That is so interesting. They knew that the silver bullet for Daniel was spending time with his God. Talking with his God. Praising and seeking his God. Prayer. That even if faced with death, we know for a fact this guy will not give up talking with his God even for 30 days. Not giving up his faith. Not make a law that you have to denounce your faith. Just stop praying. They knew that this would work for Daniel. That's the thing they knew they could get him on. Man, if somebody wanted to trap me at work, how far down the list does my prayer life appear on that list? Maybe if they went to the boss and said, hey, we need to make work mandatory on Saturdays during college football season. That might get me. That would get me. That would trip me up. I don't know where attacking my prayer life would show up. Daniel 6, verse 10. What does Daniel do? Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. Daniel knows the decree. He knows it, but the trap is perfect. Daniel's unwilling to stop praying to his God and will not pray to the king. He prays 3 times a day, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. This wasn't a practice rooted in crisis. This wasn't something he did just when a need arose. It wasn't something done out of defiance to the law. This was his everyday. Just as he had always done, he gives thanks to his Father and asks God for help. Now, what did we read about Daniel before? How have the kings described him? Every king. Intelligence and spirit. Mind of the gods. Daniel had the Spirit of God flowing through him. He had life in him. Daniel would be quick to tell us that he is not the hero of this story. He would be quick to refer us to God. He would say, I don't pray every day because I'm awesome. I don't pray every day to check it off the list because I think I ought to, because I think it's a rule of my people that we're supposed to pray every day. I don't pray every day to accomplish anything in particular. I pray every day because that's where I find life. His relationship with God was not an aspect of his life, it was his life. The cover of our the Lent devotional that we're going through over the next several weeks has a tree planted by a flowing river. It seems to me that our culture, and this isn't a Joel idea, this is a diagnosis of our culture, American culture. We tend to compartmentalize our lives, right? We've got work, we've got our work life over here, here's how I act and things I'm willing to do and for work, and then here's my family, and here's my family life, here's my fun, my travel and my hobbies, and here's my spiritual, without any one aspect really influencing the other. And so I guess that means that really at the root, at the trunk, at the root of our lives, it's self, right? It's self-actualization. It's our own grit that we rely on to kind of produce excellence in each of those compartmentalized aspects of life. So as we go with culture, we root everything in our own grit. Or maybe we pick one of those things. Maybe we pick work and we say, work is going to be the root of my life. Because if I can excel in my work, if work is where I derive my life, then I'll have the resources to provide for my family. I'll have the resources to provide for my hobbies and for my travel that I want to do. I'll have the resources to give to church, to give to organizations that I find worthy. But we know that putting work primary, how that leads to anxiety and stress, time away from family, an unhealthy relationship with money, etc. So maybe we root everything in family. We say family, that's where I derive life. But how does that affect work? Work is a good thing. How does making family primary affect your work? How does it affect your influence in the world? And we definitely see we experience how we place unhealthy expectations on our spouses or on our kids and our kids' success, how putting unhealthy expectations on others can destroy us when we view them as the source of our life. God is the only one that can give life that then overflows into all of those other areas. Everything else is what you pour out into. He is the only one that truly gives life. Nothing else can handle being at the root because nothing else is pouring out life. It can speak to all those areas. Put first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be given to you as well. Daniel wasn't praying because his spirituality was an aspect of his life. He was praying because he found life abundant in relationship with his Father. To Daniel, it was like they were saying, if you don't cut off the source of your life, then we'll kill you. And it didn't make any sense. That is why he would not ever consider giving up prayer to his God. And those around him could see it. It was so vibrant in his life. He was open about his faith in the world, and to the world, it was a weakness that could be used against him. Blessed are you who are persecuted because of me. Blessed are you who have figured out the secret sauce, who have figured out that prayer is not an ought to. It's not a thing to feel guilty about if you don't do it. It's not something just for crisis moments. It's not something that even accomplishes anything real specific. Blessed are you who have figured out that in Jesus there is life. And he's there for all the conversations if you want life and life abundantly. And blessed are you if that the life of the Spirit running through you is so vibrant that you can't let it go. And because of that, others could persecute you or exploit you because of him. How much better than being vulnerable because we won't let go of work or money or security or safety or drugs or alcohol or sex or power or even college football Saturdays. Daniel found life in his relationship with God so he prayed out of a want to multiple times a day, and he wouldn't let it go. So, Daniel 6, verse 12. So he prays, and they went to the king, and they spoke to him about his royal decree. They say, King, I don't remember. I don't remember. Did you publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown to the lions? I don't remember specifically, but did you do something like, oh yes, I did. The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, well, this is real unfortunate, but Daniel, who's one of the exiles from Judah, first of all, he's been there for 70 years. He's served in all these kingdoms. He talks like them now. He dresses like them. You can hear the derision. One of the exiles from Judah pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He wasn't mad. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Remember, the king wants Daniel running the show. This means more work for the king. That's what he's worried about. He cannot lose Daniel. He works until sundown to find a way out of the mess that he's gotten himself into. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel, and they threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace, and he spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up, hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? See, this was not a secret faith that Daniel had. It was coursing through his life, through his work. It's even got the king, who just signed a decree that no one prayed to anyone but him, calling Daniel's God the living God. And it's clear to the king that Daniel is not ultimately serving him as he serves as the greatest leader and servant in his entire kingdom, but that he's serving his God continually. Daniel answered. And the nation of Israel that reads this, wondering if they are following a God that can rescue them, erupts. Right? Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed. He gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den, and when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Here's the pictures from Jay's book of this scene. They don't put that. Oh. Okay, they don't put that part in there. Weird. Okay. Now watch this. The king is about to break into poetry, into song over this. This king that just issued a decree that no one should pray to anyone but him. This king that has lions' dens and furnaces. Listen to what he says now. And then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. When we abide in God, when we commune with him, his spirit will glow in us. I want to go back to that work thing for a minute about work can't be the source of life for us. Don't hear me saying that excelling at work is a bad thing. Work is great. Daniel was killing it at work. Go start businesses. Go get promoted. Go get Employee of the Month. But as much as Daniel was known for his work, for his intelligence, he was known more for his God. Daniel was not keeping his true motivation a secret. So when God moved in his life, it was a testimony and a witness to everyone that knew him, and it changed lives. If he wasn't awesome at his job, the impact of his witness wouldn't have been the same. If Daniel wasn't clear about the fact that who he was really serving was his king, not their king, his witness wouldn't have had the same impact. But he found life in a relationship. He found life in the time and prayer he had with his God, and he couldn't help but have that flow through to every part of his life. That pointed people toward a kingdom that will not be destroyed, toward one who rescues and saves, toward one who would enter exile on our behalf, have false charges brought against him because he was threatening their power, and who would be thrown to certain death and put in a hole sealed by a stone. But in being crushed would pay the price to rescue us from exile, from certain death. And who in his resurrection from that hole would launch a dominion that will never end, reconciling us and even creation itself to God. So, can God be trusted with the whole weight of our being? Is he worth going all in for? Yes. The story of Daniel and many others in the Bible tell us yes. He is worthy of your faith. He is worthy of putting your whole weight into him. For what? For ultimate rescue? Yes. We live in exile, in a hurting, broken, bad stuff happens all the time world. When we sinned, not only did our relationship with God break, Scripture tells us everything broke. Creation itself broke. But yes, we can trust that rescue is coming and there will be no more tears, no more pain. What else? For life now. We don't have to wait for rescue to have life. We don't have to trot along and flow with the tide of the world that leads to nothing real. We can find true life now in him. He is the source of life. And if we will trust him, spend time with him, commune with him, talk with him, not out of compulsion or ought to, or I'll feel guilty if I don't, or even out of accomplishing anything real specific, but out of that's where life is. When we abide in him, we will find life. And we will be poured into so that we can go pour out into the world. Ted Weesey, the pastor who planted this church about 15 years ago or so, as many of you know, is battling cancer. Terrible disease. He's awaiting a stem cell transplant as we speak. And I want to leave you with something he said in his last update. He said, "I am doing so well and seeing God loving me and drawing me to his heart. As I've shared before, I feel so drawn to love well. I want to live, but not so that I can accomplish anything or achieve, but that I might love." To be sure, if my prayer is to live, to be sure, if my prayer is to live, it's a prayer to love. Because in referencing 1 Corinthians 13, that is the essence of life. Everything else is just noise. Sorry, I didn't expect that. All right, will you guys pray with me?